Your last 3 Tesco receipts are higher than the ones before them, not by a little, by enough that you noticed. You probably blamed inflation or shrinkflation or the usual excuses, but something different is happening right now, and by the time most British shoppers understand what it is, the window to do anything about it will already be closed. These are the 12 grocery items that are either disappearing from British shelves or about to become unaffordable before the end of April. And the reason sits 3,000 miles away in the Persian Gulf. Here is the situation in plain terms. Israel and the United States launched airstrikes on Iran. Iran responded by effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow shipping lane through which 20% of the world's oil and gas travels every single day. And the IEA has called it the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. UK wholesale natural gas prices rose 75% between late February and the 23rd of March. Diesel prices at the pump are up 20%, and 80% of all goods in the United Kingdom travel by road. Do the maths. The British think tank, the Food Policy Institute, has warned of long-term food price increases. The Food and Drink Federation, the body that represents British food manufacturers, has warned that UK food inflation could reach 9% by the end of 2026, nearly triple its pre-war forecast. ITV News consulted academic economists advising the government's own DEFRA and came back with a figure of up to 12%. The Bank of England, which tends toward understatement, it has revised its inflation projections upward. Chancellor Rachel Reeves called in the chief executives of Tesco, Sainsbury's, Morrison's, Marks and Spencer, Aldi and Lidl for an emergency meeting at number 11. That meeting happened. That is not nothing. And here is the specific detail about Britain that makes this worse than it is for most comparable countries. The UK is only 60 or 62% food self-sufficient. That means roughly 40% of what this country eats crosses a border to get here. Professor Tim Lang of City St George's University in London, who has been warning about this for decades, put it bluntly to ITV News. Britain chose not to produce very much food. We rebuilt agriculture after the Second World War to about 82% self-sufficiency by the mid-1980s, and then slowly let it decline ever since. We are now described by economists as the worst-hit major economy in Europe from this conflict, not because of bad luck, because of choices made over 40 years. These are the 12 grocery items British shoppers need to act on before the end of April 2026. Number 1. Fresh tomatoes. And this is not a prediction. This is already happening and has been formally documented. The British Tomato Growers Association issued a direct warning in March 2026. Without government or retailer support to offset surging energy costs, many fresh produce businesses face bankruptcy before the summer. Simon Conway, chair of the BTGA, explained that growers historically only make their margin in the final weeks of the season, and that no business in the sector can absorb cost shocks of this magnitude. Higher packaging costs, higher fuel costs, and higher energy costs for the glasshouses that produce British tomatoes through the winter and spring months have created a situation where growers are doing the maths on whether to continue at all. If they stop or reduce production, the gap does not get filled domestically. It gets filled with imports that are now more expensive to ship, or it does not get filled at all. Number 2. Cucumbers, peppers, and aubergines. The BTGA specifically named all 4 of these crops, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, and aubergines, in its warning to the government. All 4 are greenhouse crops that require significant energy inputs for heating, lighting, and irrigation. All 4 are in precisely the same position as tomatoes. British producers are facing energy cost shocks they cannot absorb, while retail pricing remains under pressure from supermarkets that are themselves facing public scrutiny over prices. These are not exotic ingredients. They are the backbone of the British weekly shop. The vegetables in every stir-fry, every salad, every pasta sauce in millions of households. Their disappearance or dramatic price increase will be felt immediately and widely. Number 3. Strawberries and soft fruit. The Grocery Gazette reported on documented shortages of strawberries and raspberries at Tesco, Lidl, Sainsbury's and Asda in February 2026, before the Iran conflict even began. As weeks of torrential rain across southern Spain and Morocco, which supply the majority of UK fresh produce during winter and early spring months, had already disrupted harvests and damaged crops across 40,000 hectares of farmland. Spain's meteorological agency recorded its highest January rainfall since 2001. The Iran war and its freight cost consequences arrived on top of an already strained fresh produce supply chain. Strawberries in April sit at the intersection of two compounding disruptions. British strawberry season does not begin in earnest until May or June. Until then, we depend on Spain and Morocco, and those supply routes are under more pressure right now than at any point in recent memory. Number 4. Avocados, already flagged as a shortage item by Grocery Gazette in February 2026. Avocados reached the UK from Mexico, Peru, Kenya and South Africa. Every one of those supply routes involves container shipping that has been affected by freight cost increases from the global fuel disruption. At the same time, the cost of refrigerated transport within the UK, every lorry moving avocados from the port to the distribution centre to the supermarket, has increased by 20% since late February because of diesel price rises. Avocados are not a staple in the traditional sense, but for the millions of British households where they form part of the regular weekly shop, they are about to move from affordable to occasionally affordable to not worth buying. Number 5. Bread and plain flour. The UK imports approximately 60% of its nitrogen fertiliser. That fertiliser comes primarily from the Gulf and travels through the Strait of Hormuz. Red diesel, the rebated fuel used across British agriculture, has already risen approximately 60% according to the Conversations analysis of the Iran war's impact on UK farming. The NFU cited rising fuel and fertiliser costs as key factors already impacting British food manufacturers. Wheat, the crop that becomes the flour that becomes every loaf on every shelf in Britain, is one of the most nitrogen-intensive crops in production. A single wheat crop can require over 200 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. British farmers right now are making impossible calculations. Do I apply full nitrogen at current prices and risk a loss, or do I reduce the application and accept lower yields? Either outcome reduces what ends up in the ground this spring. What is in the ground this spring determines what is on the shelf this autumn. The bread you buy at the end of 2026 is being decided in British fields right now. Number 6. Cooking oil. Specifically, sunflower oil, vegetable oil, and rapeseed oil. Ukraine, which was already severely disrupted as a sunflower oil producer from the ongoing conflict there, supplies a significant portion of European sunflower oil. British rapeseed oil production faces the same fertiliser and fuel cost pressures as every other UK arable crop, and the shipping cost increases from the Iran conflict apply to every liquid bulk commodity moving through global freight networks. The shift in consumer behaviour that follows cooking oil price increases is also worth noting. When olive oil became expensive, British shoppers shifted to sunflower and vegetable oil. When those become expensive or unavailable, there is nowhere left to shift. For the households already making difficult budget decisions at the weekly shop, cooking oil price increases are not an inconvenience. They are a practical problem that changes how families eat. Number 7. Eggs. This one has two compounding problems that arrived at the same time from different directions. Avian influenza has been devastating UK laying flocks for over 18 months. The British Free-Range Egg Producers Association documented that around 165 farmers had temporarily or permanently ceased production during previous outbreak cycles, and the situation has not stabilised. Now layer on the Iran conflict. The energy costs for heating the hen houses that keep laying flocks productive through British winters have increased sharply alongside every other energy input. Eggs were already heading toward a sustained supply and price problem before February 2026. The fuel crisis arrived on top of a sector already under stress. Subscribe to this channel right now if this is changing how you think about this week's shopping. We cover the real British consumer story that the mainstream press buries on page 12, and what is coming next on this list is the part most people have not connected yet. Number 8. Orange juice. This one predates the Iran conflict, but the conflict has made it significantly worse. Florida's citrus production has collapsed by over 80% in the past decade due to citrus greening disease and back-to-back hurricanes. Brazil, which picked up the slack, experienced its worst orange harvest in decades due to drought and heat stress in 2024 and 2025. Global orange juice was already trading at historically high commodity prices before the Iran war added freight cost increases on top. Tropicana and Innocent have both been affected, with prices more than doubling at the wholesale level. Not from concentrate orange juice, the product that sits in the chilled section and moves in large volume through British supermarkets is effectively becoming a premium product. By the end of April 2026, many British households will have quietly stopped buying it because the price no longer makes sense against the household budget. Number 9. Pasta. Directly wheat dependent, meaning it carries all the same fertilizer and supply chain vulnerability as flour and bread, with the additional pressure of plastic packaging price increases driven by petrochemical supply disruption. The same Strait of Hormuz closure that is restricting oil is restricting the petrochemical inputs that plastic packaging depends on. Italy, the dominant global pasta producer, is facing energy costs for pasta manufacturing that have increased alongside every other energy input across European industry. The House of Commons Library noted that chemical manufacturers in the UK and EU are imposing surcharges of up to 30% on energy-intensive products. Pasta manufacturing is energy-intensive. That cost goes somewhere. It goes to the shelf price. Number 10. Olive oil. Are already compromised before the war began by back-to-back failed harvests across Spain, Italy, and Greece, together responsible for the vast majority of global production. The fraud problem we have covered on this channel previously has worsened as genuine extra virgin supply tightened. More blending with cheap alternatives, more misleading labeling, more premium prices for inferior product. Now add the freight cost increases from the Iran conflict on top of an already depleted supply. The olive oil on the Tesco shelf right now is the most expensive it has been in living memory, is not guaranteed to be what the label claims, and is about to get more expensive again as the current supply contracts expire and retailers renegotiate at market rates that reflect the current reality. Number 11. Coffee. The UK imports 100% of its coffee. Every bean crosses a border. Green coffee is roasted in Britain, but the raw material comes from Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, Ethiopia, and other producing countries via container shipping. Freight costs are up. Sterling has weakened against the dollar, the currency in which coffee is traded globally, as the Iran conflict has driven currency volatility across European markets. The Bank of England noted on the 19th of March 2026 that interest rate cuts previously anticipated are now unlikely to materialize, and rate hikes are now possible. A weaker pound means more expensive imports. More expensive imports means more expensive coffee. The flat white you buy at Costa or Pret is about to reflect that. The bag of beans in your kitchen cupboard will too. Number 12. Paracetamol and ibuprofen. I am including this because GB News specifically flagged it in their coverage of the Iran conflict's impact on British supply chains, and it is the item on this list that most people will not have considered. Both paracetamol and ibuprofen have petroleum as a key ingredient in their manufacturing process. The petrochemical supply disruption from the Strait of Hormuz closure affects pharmaceutical manufacturing inputs in exactly the same way it affects plastic packaging. These are not luxury items. They are the basic over-the-counter medicines that British households go through in significant quantities every winter, And given that the UK's only 4 functioning oil refineries are already under capacity pressure, the domestic manufacturing buffer for petroleum-dependent products is thin. Buy a reasonable supply now. This is not panic buying. It is recognizing that medicines with petroleum-derived active ingredients are part of the same supply chain problem as everything else on this list. Here is the complete picture of what April 2026 looks like for British shoppers. Fresh produce, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, aubergines, strawberries, avocados is under simultaneous pressure from domestic energy costs, Spanish and Moroccan weather disruption, and freight cost increases on imports. Staples, bread, pasta, flour, cooking oil face the fertilizer and fuel cost crisis working through the wheat and oilseed supply chains. Eggs face the double pressure of ongoing avian flu and surging energy costs. Orange juice was already a structural supply problem before the war made it worse. Olive oil is at peak deception risk alongside peak price. Coffee is a currency and freight problem. And medicines with petroleum derivatives are an afterthought that will become a thought very quickly if you run out in May. The action here is simple and does not require clearing a shelf or spending a fortune. Look at the 12 categories on this list. Identify the ones your household goes through most quickly. Buy an extra 2 to 4 weeks of the non-perishable items this week, while supply is normal and the price has not yet fully reflected what is happening in the supply chain. For the perishable items, particularly fresh produce, use the next 2 weeks to build a small store of frozen and canned alternatives. Frozen peas, tinned tomatoes, tinned peppers, not glamorous, genuinely useful. The Food and Drink Federation's warning about 9% food inflation has been sitting on the government's desk since March. The ITV economists said 12% is possible. The Bank of England is revising upward, and the Strait of Hormuz is still effectively closed. This is not fear-mongering. This is arithmetic. The window to act at current prices is weeks, not months. Subscribe to this channel for more British consumer and supply chain coverage that gives you the information before it is already too late to use it. Share this with someone you know who has not yet connected the Iran war to their weekly food shop. Because the connection is real, it is documented, and it is arriving at the checkout whether people are ready for it or not. Tell us in the comments which of these 12 items you're already seeing signs of on your local shelves. See you in the next one.